What's up guys, and welcome back to Gladiators Tribe. My name is Grisha and today we're back with yet another racket review. This time reviewing the brand new, very new Babolat Pure Strike 116 by 20. Yeah, you always got to make sure you don't screw up the naming because there's like thousands of Pure Strikes available like always. But the previous version of the Pure Strike has really impressed me and it has been in several of my top 5 rackets. And I don't really know what exactly Babolat could do to improve the feeling and the performance of the racket. And for the purposes of this video, I actually haven't seen any other reviews and I haven't even checked out the exact specs of the new Babolat Pure Strike 116 by 20 just to make this review as sort of like unbiased as possible. But what I can say for sure is that finally Babolat is stepping on the right track in terms of their paint jobs, because this new Babolat looks way better than the previous one. But as I always say, I guess paint job is not the most important thing in a racket, or is it? But yeah, without further ado, check out the specs. So as I said, when I first got this racket, I went into playtesting it completely blind. I didn't read any press releases or even check the specs, and my first impressions of it were not so great. In fact, I felt like Babolat have done something wrong. It reminded me of the racket of 2 iterations before this one, which I really didn't like. I've said a lot of not so great things about it because I really didn't understand that racket, because the sweet spot was really small, and even if you hit it, the reward wasn't nearly as satisfying as it should be. You got a very mediocre shot that wasn't more powerful than any other racket or more controlled than any other racket, and it's not like you got some crazy feel and understanding of where the ball is going. So that racket, I completely discarded it and I did not enjoy it. And what kind of scared me was that this thing gave me kind of similar vibes. And I just couldn't believe that Babolat could come back to that old formula, having achieved what I consider pretty much a perfect racket back in 2024 with the V4 version of the Babolat Pure Strike. And then I realized that I'm playing with a string that it's not that I'm not even used to, it's one that I don't really like. The Babolat XL is definitely a string that I would not recommend for this racket or for pretty much any other racket, because when I switched to my usual Technifiber Razor Soft 125 string, the whole picture completely repainted itself. The sweet spot somehow got larger, I got more power, more control, way better feel and understanding of the ball, and this racket started reminding me way more of the Gen 4, which I absolutely loved, and it was a racket that has made many of the top 5s back in 2024. So then I get home ready to start the actual review of the racket, and I decide, hey, why not check the specs and check what the internet says about this new Babolat Pure Strike generation of rackets, and turns out that it's just a paint job update. So yeah, I guess on one hand it's cool that I went into this playtest blind because, you know, I could properly judge the whole situation, but I could have saved myself a lot of time, struggle and inconvenience that had to do with the fact that I couldn't believe that this racket could go back to being bad, where in fact it wasn't back to being bad and it's still a very good freaking racket. Just like in 2024, the Pure Strike lineup is huge. There's 8 different rackets that are all called Pure Strike that have different configurations of string pattern, head size and weight. And this 16 by 20 100-inch version is in fact my favorite one, because it's what I feel like offers the most balanced experience of tennis, where you do get that control that I want and need in my tennis, but you don't compromise much on the power and you still have a decent amount of spin. By the way, guys, if you feel like you already want to get this Babolat Pure Strike 116 by 20 in this beautiful carbon paint job, the link to get it or anything else tennis related is going to be down in the description below, together with our exclusive discount code that will save you some cash and that also really helps the channel. Now, although this huge lineup of Pure Strike rackets might be confusing, it's actually perfect if you want to really dial in their racket choice and really dial in their tennis, because this is what I consider a pretty balanced racket with good power, spin, control and feel. But if you were to want a little bit more spin and a little bit more power with the same kind of feeling, you could go for the 16 by 19 version of this 100-inch. Or if you want more control or more feel, you can go down in head size or up in string pattern. But now let's get to the actual playtest and to the shot-by-shot analysis, starting with the ground strokes. The ground strokes are equally good on both forehand and backhand. The racket allows you to play flat if you want to go aggressive and switch down the line a lot, or you can play with a decent amount of spin, go for longer rallies, deeper shots, and tiring your opponent. I wouldn't say that this is the most spin-friendly racket or the most powerful racket, but it does the job very well. If you're a very versatile player who likes to switch things up a lot, this is a really good racket. Another thing that I really like about the Pure Strike 100-inch, both 16x19 and this 16x20, is that it really encourages you to go to the net more. Because you're able to easily generate flat, aggressive, down the line approach shots, as well as open angles with your backhand, for example, to get that angle to go to the net, you're more likely to end up at the net. Once you're there, it's a matter of your talent and a matter of your practice, but this 100-inch version will help you a little bit more when it comes to the finishing and ending shot at the net and actually putting it down where you want it. Because the sweet spot on this thing, although bigger than with the two iterations before this racket, it's still not, you know, massive. It's not something like on a Wilson Ultra of the latest generation or on a Yonex E-Zone 100, for example, right? Where wherever you hit, the ball just lands in the sweet spot. This is not the case. You still have to kind of try, kind of put it in, and where it's most noticeable is at the net. However, I wouldn't say that it's something bad, because this racket is kind of demanding to a certain extent, where you have to actually play well and improve your technique, but it's not overwhelmingly demanding to a point where you just don't want to play tennis, period. Now on the serves is where this racket really shines, because it opens the entire spectrum of serves to your disposal. You can go for flat, fast down the tee first serves and ace every second serve, open angles with your slice and go up to the net because of how good and sharp that angle is. And if you have to and you somehow miss the first serve, you're able to generate a lot of spin on the kick serves and actually make the ball bounce in a way that it's not going to be a very easy shot to attack. It's not a racket that gives you free spin and power, especially on the kick serves. No, you do have to put in the work into the shot yourself, but if you do, it is going to reward you, and the spin of the kick serve is going to be plenty not to have to go into defense on your serve and be able to attack. I also let my friend Sasha playtest this thing to get a second opinion on this Pure Strike 16x20, and his usual racket of choice is the Head Radical Pro 2025. Coming from that racket, the Pure Strike seemed to be an easier racket to handle and to play with a bigger head size, and he seemed to really enjoy it. He had to play test it with the Babolat XL string, which was not ideal, but he actually didn't hate it as much as I did even in that setup. So who is this racket for then? Well, I would specify it as players who like to play all around the court and they like to attack and go to the net, but also like to play at the baseline. If you're a completely aggressive serve and volley player, this racket will do really well as well. And the only type of player that this racket is, it's not that it doesn't fit them, but it's just not the perfect racket for them, is if you're a baseline grinder who just tires their opponent and plays a lot of cross-court deep shots, because this racket can produce those shots, but it's just not the easiest racket for this kind of tennis. Now, if you're just looking for a very versatile racket that kind of does it all, this is also a really good frame. In fact, this was actually a racket that made my top 5 most versatile rackets that do it all back in 2024, and it really means something. Not best racket for first-time users, definitely not. It still kind of demands a lot of footwork and demands decent technique that is already down in place, but it's very good for those of you glads who want it all. And you might say, but Grish, that's not what you said about versatile rackets and rackets that try to do it all. You never mentioned that it was something good. In fact, you said that when rackets and racket brands try to go for a versatile racket that does everything well, they end up creating a racket that does everything mediocrely bad. And that used to be the case 3 or 4 years ago when this racket was in its 3rd generation, where I absolutely hated it, when the Wilson Blade 98 was kind of a not racket that I was really understanding, and I couldn't really get around the popularity of this racket. But now that's not the case. Brands are actually managing to produce rackets that do everything at a really good level. They have good power, have good control, they produce a lot of spin, and the feel doesn't magically disappear because of the bigger head size. And in fact, the proof of that is that many of the pro players on the ATP and WTA tours are now switching to these kinds of versatile rackets like the EZone 98, for example, where it's a racket that offers you good level of everything. And this is no exception. Now, if I'd known that this was just a paint job update and I'd actually read anything about the racket before going into playtesting it, I maybe wouldn't even have done this review because, you know, why? I would just let you know that, yeah, the new Babolat Pure Strike paint job is out. Check it out if you like it. But I'm glad that Babolat have stuck with their already perfect formula for a racket and just improved the paint job, which is something that I really asked them to do, and they did it. I want to think that they did it because I asked them to work on the paint job. By the way, Babolat, if that's the reason why you changed the paint job of your entire lineup, well done. I like that one way more. But yeah, you're probably seeing the grays appear on the screen right now, and they're definitely going to be the same ones as with the previous review of the Gen 4 Pure Strike, except of course for the sexiness department where this gets a huge upgrade. But yeah, while you're at it, you might as well want to check out our Instagram page where I've been posting a lot of mainly funny vertical content. If you're into that kind of stuff, feel absolutely free to follow us on Instagram. I sometimes throw in some updates about my life and my tennis life in there in the stories as well. But yeah, I guess it's enough of the scores. If you want to see them for a little longer, feel absolutely free to go back and pause. But that's it from me for today. Like always, my name is Grisha. You're watching Gladiators Tribe, and I will see you glads in the next one. Bye-bye.